Welcome back. I am your host, as he just said, Attorney Stephen Leahy. And this is the IRS Radio Hour on AM 560. The Answer. And I am joined today by my co-host, Jim Leahy, and the whole group.
Hey,
we got the group. We have a very special guest. And we're going to talk about that in just a minute. But where are we now, Jim?
There's an intro to this, and we should just... It explains it all.
Okay.
It's the blog segment. The blog. The blog. It's like this one in Rocky is like very tough to...
That's not tough.
I have a tough time with
I know
it.
you do.
I have a tough time with my adjectives and nouns.
You have a tough time tying your shoes.
Oh, man, Jake. You're going to come firing out of the cylinders over here.
He wears slip-ons.
They're actually Skechers and they're Velcro. So, sir, they light up. What do you got?
So this week on the blog, my blog segment, I have written an article. It's called Mark Glennon of WirePoints.com. And he is here. Mr. Mark Glennon is here today joining us. And I want to introduce him and ask, first, let's talk about where you're from. Let's talk about what you do, where you're from. Where are you from?
Sure. I grew up here in the suburbs, Park Forest. It's a south suburb. Practiced law initially. That was
you couldn't do far because you went to. You told me you went to high school. Where'd you go to high school?
Marian Catholic.
Catholic. I always like to have the Catholics say that, so I didn't want you to skip it. Too many Catholics today skip it. They don't even go to mass anymore. So
Chicago accents are going away, unfortunately.
Well, that's a real south side thing.
We could do a whole show on that.
That's true.
It's so true. It's so true.
And so then you went to law school?
I did. Yep. And practiced law. Actually, most of my time practicing law was in Texas in the 1980s. And then I practiced here in Chicago. Second career was with in a venture capital firm, investing in high-tech companies here in Chicago.
Oh, you have an interesting background in some high-tech companies.
Real quick,
don't you?
Mark, from being in Texas, is there a basement in the Alamo? And if so, I heard that I have some things on.
I don't think Mark. I don't think Pee Wee Herman.
There's a great bar across the street.
Now that makes sense.
There we go.
Now that makes sense. What was I just asking you? About the you practice law, and I was talking about your tech company. You have some.
Sure.
You have an interesting background in one in particular, but a number of good firms. Is that right?
We had some luck in a lot of losers, but a few winners. That's kind of the way venture capital is. You play for hit the fences on a few. But, that's a lot of fun. I mean, there's a wonderfully talented, smart bunch of people in the tech community in Chicago and across the country, and it was a lot of fun to work with them.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit because you were honored from the governor here in Illinois, haven't you? What happened? Talk about that a little bit.
Well, we have something called the Innovate Illinois Advisory Council, and that's a group of unpaid advisors who are trying to come up with ideas to help stimulate the tech, innovation, entrepreneurial community across the state. So we meet irregularly and are in the process of putting together some formal suggestions for things that might be pursued by the governor's office.
Now, you and I were talking before the show, you were saying that you see some hope for success here with the tech companies in Chicago.
Oh, I think we've already gotten there. That's contrary to a lot of other problems we have. That the tech sector here is has really arrived. It's far past critical mass. Out of town venture capital firms from both coasts come here. We got a lot of thriving companies. There's been a lot of good exits, and but most gratifyingly, I think that young guys and women that have been successful keep at it. They keep forming other companies, and they reinvest the money that they made into new companies. So it's really going very well.
I know a lot of successful tech companies they become venture capitalists themselves, and they do a lot of
angel investors.
Yeah,
that's right.
And angels. That's right. Talk a little bit about that, about the difference between an angel investor and a VC.
Well, an angel investor is really just an individual that makes the same kind of early stage investments that an institutional VC would. A lot of angels are organized into kind of formal groups that do operate very professionally here. There are a number of them here in town. Hyde Park Angels, I think, is the largest. And then a venture capital firm is more formal. They typically raise their money from pensions and foundations and things like that, and then they They do what Governor Rauner's firm used to do, which is pool that money and go out and invest in private investments, technology companies or whatever, kind of like private equity does with buyouts. So they take larger rounds in later stage companies.
Mm-hmm. So you live here around Chicago, don't you?
I do. I live in Wilmette. Have married, a couple kids there. That's right.
Oh, great. And how old are your kids?
13 and 16.
How long you been married?
20 years next year.
Well, God bless you. I'm about 20. I'm 20 years next year myself. So,
Whoa.
Whoa is right. Whoa is me. So you right now with the let's talk about WirePoints and what that is and how did you get that started and what do you hope to do with it?
Sure, that's really starting to consume most of my time now. But really, I got very alarmed about the whole fiscal situation across the state going back. In 2002, actually, it became apparent to me, and I first wrote that I thought Illinois was broke, and started spending more and more time on it, particularly the situation with municipalities around Chicago, including Chicago, the school district, all the overlapping jurisdictions here, and didn't think the story was being told by the press properly, and that we needed to get the word out and really start dealing with this and trying to match the remedy with the size of the problem, which is now, unfortunately, in my opinion, really insurmountable. I think we've got a train wreck in motion here. It's not going to be stopped, and we're really in a situation now of disaster mitigation. It's not disaster avoidance anymore, and we better start taking this seriously.
So I know you've taken a lot of interest. I've read a lot of your you're a prolific writer, so you have a lot of articles out there. I've read, and you write a lot about Chicago's pension problems, Illinois' pension problems. The schools, right? I know you take particular interest in the schools and the teachers' union and things like that.
You wouldn't think there's that much to write, right? Because it's perfect.
Yeah, I agree, and that's why I say I have a new fan because the WirePoints, the way it's set up. You think you read a lot about Illinois and then Chicago and then your own writings about these things, and I think you're right in that it's a very important aspect of what's going on, and people don't really see. That's one reason why we're losing population, don't you think, about our economic woes?
Absolutely, and that's the real one of the core problems is that the tax base isn't growing, and there's simply no way out of this mess unless you restore growth to the tax base. You're going to have to do other things too, but economic growth is an essential element of turning this around, and we're not doing it. We're losing population and employers too.
Well, I mean, we see this all across the nation. Take a look at Detroit; they have the same issue too. We were talking about this before.
Texas.
Yeah,
well, Texas. There's some success stories out there.
We were talking about this before the show that how Chicago isn't really Chicago anymore. You got all these. It's not the way it used to be 25 years ago.
Well, we talked about that on the show,
and you just mentioned it too. For the Chicago accent's like a dying thing now. You know, like what's up with that?
Because you don't have the working people that live in Chicago any longer.
That's right.
They just want the rich living down there.
There's that. We've talked about that on the show about the map that shows the very rich, the very poor, and the middle class. There really isn't any middle class anymore. There's the very rich and there's the very poor. And the middle class is moving. And they're not moving to the suburbs, as you talked about, because there's a lot of problems in the suburbs and their tax base. They're moving to places like Texas. And they're moving with their feet. They're voting with their feet. We see that.
No question. And it's not just the middle class. The wealthy, you might have seen a study a few months ago that came out that said Chicago was in the top 5 in the world for departure of millionaires.
Oh.
And, I certainly see that with the angel investors that I work with in technology, where they're, I'm talking about really wealthy folks, the folks that have 3 homes anyway. Well, they change residence, even if they're here. Or, I've been out collecting signatures on a political campaign. People, in Lake Forest or some hoity-toity place, they'll say, well, sorry, I'm not registered here. I'm registered in Florida.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so well, we got a lot more to talk about on the show.
Of course, I mean we got everything lined up here, ladies and gentlemen. We have a local attorney, as in Stephen Leahy, who will help you with your IRS problems, and then we also have a local reporter over here at WirePoints. So, ladies and gentlemen, make sure you stay tuned because we have so much more coming at you. There's so much more information. So remember, if you need any help with the IRS, call Open Tax Resolutions at 312-664-6649. Now, stay tuned after the commercial break. More IRS Radio Hour on AM 560.
The Answer.